normally you would expect gold to be rallying with uncertainty geopolitically. Um, what's going on is there is, among the smart money, there is concern that they may shut down the free markets.
Wow.
Um, and it's, I understand it. They've done it before. And we have to be mindful of what's taking place. The real concern here is that these neocons want some sort of a confrontation before the election to influence it.
Hey guys, my name is Danny and you're watching Capital Cosm. Today, I'm pleased to have trend forecaster Martin Armstrong back on the show. Martin, thank you so much for making your second visit to Capital Cosm.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure. We'll just dive right in, Martin. Let's start off broad, and then we got to hone in on any specific topics that come our way. And let's do that by asking you, what's your broad view of the economy is? What is your 30,000-foot view of the economy, the markets, or anything in general? What's top of mind, top of radar for you right now?
Well, I would say two things. One is the move to war, and two is that our computer, picked the high in the economy, May 15th. We're going into a recessionary period into 2028. The central bank started lowering rates right after our model turned. And I do know that a lot of them are watching it these days. I mean, it's had a great track record for 40 years. So, and it doesn't much matter who wins the election. Even Trump's not going to be able to change it. The economy, we're all connected. So it's not just the United States. You're looking at Europe is in serious crisis, which is why they really are pushing for war. All right. When they were creating the euro, they came to me because we were basically the largest foreign exchange advisors. And I told them, look, this is how you set up the currency. And they were pitching it that this was going to, kill the dollar and all this kind of stuff. And what really happened was that Chancellor Kohl of Germany was, he never allowed the German people to vote on joining the euro. And he even admitted that he acted like a dictator. What he did, he took Germany into the euro, and without that, it would not have, come about. And he admitted that if he let the German people vote on it, he would have lost 7-3. So he was doing it basically as a dictator, as he said. And his condition was no consolidation of the debt. And so I warned them, this is not going to succeed. All right, because from a trader's perspective, fine, you buy the lira, short the franc or whatever. You trade one country against the other. All right. But because you didn't consolidate the debt, all you did was transfer that volatility from this currency market to the bond market. So now, they short Italian and they buy the bunds, that's just the way capital works. And so I told them, you're never going to, they were selling it. Oh, we joined this 1 euro, one currency. You all pay the same interest rates. I said, that's not going to happen. Fine. The United States has one interest rate federally, but we got 50 states.
Mm-hmm.
They all, it depends upon their own credit rating. I said, the same thing's going to happen in Europe. So the dream of the euro has basically failed. They have a migration crisis that's going in there, an economic crisis because they adopted all this, basically the climate change nonsense, shutting down, raising costs. Then you have the Ukraine war, blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. I mean, there's just no way that Europe is going to be in an economic stagnation. Even, I mean, it's just going, it's declining. That's it. Um, so there, it's basically irrelevant if Camilla or Trump got in. Neither one is going to be able to prevent the economic decline because we're not alone in this. All right, you got Europe going down. Asia's got its problems as well, and so you can't have one economy basically booming and everybody else is crumbling around around you. You know, so that's basically it. We have to understand that the Fed understood that this is a problem. You got find decent job numbers. I mean, domestically, we're not that desperate yet. Um, but and it's coming, and we're losing economic. I would say productivity because those that are selling things outside the country will, they're going to be seeing their sales declining, etc. Because the overseas markets are not that great, but and then you have the prospect of war, and when you go into war, that in itself is inflationary. I mean, it was the Vietnam War and the inflation of that which broke Bretton Woods by 71. I mean, I think a 3-year-old with a pocket calculator could have forecast that one, I mean, you're fixing the dollar at 35 to an ounce of gold, but then you don't limit the amount of dollars that you print. Obviously, the system's going to collapse at some point. I don't think it takes, a Nobel Prize to figure that one out.
I want to ask you, the Fed lowered interest rates by 50 basis points last month, but we're seeing this rebellion in the bond market. The 10-year still ripping up higher by way of its yield. What is going on there? Why is this decoupling in the bond market from the Fed funds rate?
Mainly because of the prospect of war, and you have capital shifting. If you step back and you look at the big picture, U.S. was virtually bankrupt in 1896. It's when J.P. Morgan had to come in, lend $100 million to the Treasury to bail it out. All right. It was World War I that moved the financial capital from London to New York. By World War II, we had 76% of the world gold, reserves, which is why the U.S. became the reserve currency. All right. So the higher the prospect of war in the Middle East and also in Europe, and then you have our crazy neocons threatening China over Taiwan. Mm-hmm. I mean, basically, the only place to put capital is we're back to World War I and World War II. It comes here. And, that's basically what's happening. And when you get into this, really the yield curve, you can see what is actually developing here. And most people today don't realize, but if you go back to 1980, the spread between the long term and the short term was almost 9%. I mean, that's a pretty healthy, gap.
That's a huge gap. It's like a Grand Canyon sized gap.
Exactly. I mean, go look at more historical charts from there, and you see that, it can get really, really wild. It's a question of confidence. And when, people begin to wake up, and they are starting to wake up in Europe. I mean, I had just gotten back from Europe. I spoke to 3 different governments, and, it's shocking. Everybody wants war.
Well, what about in terms of the population? I mean, obviously, it's not been good for the German economy. It's not been good for the European economy as a whole. What about the people themselves? Do you see a potential, let's call it uprising from the politician, from the populist class to the politician class to stop this war from escalating between Ukraine and Russia and potentially spilling out into Europe?
Yeah, I mean, it's you have to understand that the people of Russia, Europe, America, China, the average person doesn't want war. What do we gain out of it? You know, you get drafted, you go off to go fight, and you're, the best you can hope is you come back in one piece. We get nothing out of it. I think I had posted a comment from the longest living, veteran from World War One, and he said we should have just, I think 45 million people died. He said we should have just taken the world leaders, throw them in a room, give them a gun, and let them settle it.
Mm.
But I mean, this is the truth. I mean, the average person doesn't get anything out of this, and um, why should we ruin our economy and send our children to go die for what in Ukraine, for the Donbass, which is been historically Russian? I mean, most people don't realize that Ukraine was never a country. Okay, they were kind of like the Kurds in Iraq, and they joined Hitler mainly because he promised to give them a country. And if you look at it, Khrushchev basically was in charge of rebuilding Kiev. He came from that region. His successor, Brezhnev, was born in the Donbass.
Mm.
All right. So you're not talking about, a foreign country per se that Russia's trying to conquer. I mean, there are Russians there. They've been there for a long time.
Yeah,
We had two employees, one in Kiev and we had one in Donetsk. And they would never even talk to each other. You don't realize the deep-seated hatred that is among all these different ethnic groups in Europe. I mean, I've been in Athens and they were protesting against the Germans and the parades and everybody dressed up in uniforms. I mean, I think if a French girl, told her father, gee, I'm bringing my German boyfriend home, I think he's going to say, you do know what they did to us.
mm-hmm.
These things just, I don't know. Like I said, before Yugoslavia broke up, I was called in by the government and they were saying, oh, they killed 600 of us and threw us in a common grave. And I'm like, I thought I missed something on the news. I said, really? I said, when did this happen? Oh, about 700 years ago. Oh, yes, that one. Okay. The memories go on for, centuries.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing in the Middle East. You look at Iran is Shiite. I know a lot of people don't understand, Islam. Shiite basically tends to follow Muhammad's brother-in-law, and they have the burqas, and they believe that effectively the church should run the state. So that's why they're against Saudi Arabia, which is the kingdom, and Jordan, etc. You go to Turkey, and you look in the newspaper on page 3. There's a girl in the bikini. So completely different philosophies, and it's religious. I mean, this is more like the Protestant Reformation, between the Catholics and the Protestants. It's not something that you're going to solve by some sort of negotiated, compromise or something. And this is a deep-seated hatred, and I don't think it's solvable.
Yeah, so we are seeing these escalations in the Middle East. We are awaiting this retaliation to the retaliation from Iran to Israel, and then now we're waiting for Israel to retaliate back to Iran. And in the process of all of this, the oil price has gone completely bonkers. I think it hit a high of $76, $77 WTI. early, right on Friday as we went into the weekend. But now it's kind of sold a lot of that off. I think it's right back down to 72 last time I checked. What exactly is going on there with the volatility of the oil market? Is this just simply a pricing mechanism for war and risk? And what does it tell us now that's sold off?
Um, the sell-off there in gold, etc. Um, what we have to be concerned about is this push for war. If you look at what they did in World War One and World War Two, they put in rationing, price controls, and they shut down free markets. Most people don't know, their financial history, but the world was much more connected financially before World War One. Capital moved
Mm.
freely. There weren't restrictions. Arbitrage was dominant. You'd have the same bond listed on the St. Petersburg exchange in Russia as in Berlin and as in New York and London. So people arbitraged them all the time. You could trade stock while sailing on a ship, from New York to London. Telegraph. I mean, it was much more of a world economy before 1914. Then with World War One, they shut down all the stock markets in Europe. U.S. Shut down for several weeks, then they finally opened up. They did that because it was all connected, and they were fearing capital flight from one country to another, etc. So when World War II came, you see the similar things. Then they put in wage and price controls and rationing books.
Mm-hmm.
You can find these things on eBay, and so the fact that we have this high in gold, etc., in September and starting to back off, normally you would expect gold to be rallying with uncertainty geopolitically. What's going on is there is among the smart money, there's concern that they may shut down the free markets.
Wow.
And it's I understand it. They've done it before, and we have to be mindful of what's taking place. The real concern here is that these neocons want some sort of a confrontation before the election to influence it.
So harping on the shutting down of the free market, does that pertain to the entirety of it, or just are you referring to the gold and silver market, or just the gold market? And in which jurisdiction? Just the
No,
United States, or how?
no, they would do it on a coordinated basis as they did before. And I would be more concerned about what takes place in Europe, because that is Europe is really on the ropes at this stage in the game economically.
Yeah.
And
so just to be clear, are you referring to just the gold market or the
no, it would be
market?
stocks. It would be broader.
Okay.
It's capital. You're going to see capital controls. Like China with Bitcoin. What made Bitcoin really take off? It was really all the capital coming out of China. They were using it to get money out.
I see.
And then China called everybody in and kind of shut that down a bit. So you're looking at that. It's more capital controls that they're interested in, and you may not be able to even wire money, things of that nature. I was going over to Singapore for a conference there, and I had a friend there, and I said, "Look, get me in a service department, would you?" And rather than staying in a hotel, and I said, fine, I'll wire you the money. And I did. And when I got there, I mean, we've been friends for a long time. He says, that wire never came. I said, what? I called my bank. He said he never got it. His bank was HSBC. I said, put a tracer on the wire. HSBC refused to put it into his account because they couldn't verify I had no personal interest in it. It's just, I had to write him a I mean, this is the stuff you're looking for. Anything over $3,000 now, trying to send to an individual outside this country, good luck. It sends up all kinds of red flags. You can pay a company, but an individual, no. So this is, the whole digital currency thing it's also about taxes. But that's really what's behind this. And I've spoken with governments both in Europe and the United States. And they think eliminating paper money, that they will increase their tax collection by 35%. And Europe routinely cancels its currency. If you got a 10-pound note from just 20 years ago, it's no good. You have to go to the central bank and they'll give you a new one. This is why the dollar is partly the reserve currency, because somebody can hold $100 bills in China and they don't have to worry about the U.S. canceling it. They don't do that with euro. I still have a bunch of high denomination notes from India, from the last trip there. They're worthless anymore. That's just the way it goes. Everybody else cancels their currency. Canada just canceled all the high denomination notes at the beginning of the year. Americans aren't aware of that. If you have a $5 bill from 1861, it's still $5. I mean, it's worth a lot more to a collector, but it hasn't been demonetized. So that's part of the reason behind the dollar reserve status. And that's why actually 70% of the paper money that the U.S. produces is outside the country.
Wow. So I want to go back to your price control comment. If gold is to be price controlled, what else? How do people get around it? Is there a way to get around this and maintain your wealth and your capital, or just a haircut we're all just going to take inevitably? And how far off are we from something like this happening? What would be some of the telltale signs to occur to warn people that this might be coming around the pike?
I think it is. The markets are starting to show that the serious money, they know what I'm talking about here. And I think that's why you see oil down, you see gold down, when in theory, your geopolitical risk is rising. Yeah. It should be going up, not down.
And Warren Buffett sold all of his Apple stock, a bunch of other stocks as well that he holds dear to him. Could that also be a part of it?
I mean, they'll just close the market. It's not that it's worthless. As far as anything alternative, I would say that would be the old silver coins before 1965, gold. There's always going to be a black market.
Hey guys, quick pause. I won't take too much of your time, but if you're looking to add into your gold and silver stack, please consider Miles Franklin. More specifically, email them, info@milesfranklin.com, and tell them that Capital Cosmos sent you in the subject line to unlock special pricing that you won't find on the website. In the unlikely event that you don't like the prices, you could always not buy. There's no commitment necessary, but I do recommend Miles Franklin for a number of reasons. The customer support is top-notch, the prices are great, and I know the people there. Great people all around. So with all that said, let's get back to the video. Thanks, guys.
And that will simply be what people use for money. Your economy it's a barter system. You accept a $10 bill only because somebody else will take it from you. All right. It's not that the monetary instrument itself has any value. And I know a lot of people say, "Oh, fiat should go." If you look at your history, all right, you'll see India used to reproduce Roman coins. Why? Because the same amount of gold stamped by Rome was worth more than anything else. Why? Because it's kind of like the dollar. Okay, they were the economic power, so it becomes acceptable. You see the same thing when Alexander the Great. There, people were minting imitations of that. Athens, the same thing. They always imitate. It's the same amount of metal, same. So it's showing that there was a premium because of who they were. So it's not simply a metal value one versus the other. That's not always the case. We do tend historically to put a premium on to whoever is the monetary giant at the time. So I would say that you're probably looking at the old gold coins of America, the $20 gold piece, $5, etc. As forming an underground economy, so to speak, right. That because there's always going to be a black market. I don't care what the government ever does, no matter what. They restrict gas and somebody takes a bribe, fill it up, please. And that's just
human nature.
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to get nothing out of this. I mean, all I've heard about, if we go to a digital currency, we'll eliminate crime. Yeah, good luck. All right. Romans have, you can Google them up, prostitute tokens. Because there was a law that said you couldn't pay a prostitute with a coin that had the image of the emperor on it. All right. So they issued prostitute tokens, and the girl would take that, and then she would exchange that back for money. I mean, it's, there's always a way around everything. That's just human nature. There's a traffic light, and if you can cut around the corner from that, you don't have to wait, 2 minutes. People do it.
Yeah, as long as you can get away with it. Does this occur inevitably, regardless of whether Trump or Kamala wins, or is there a difference between the two?
I think that Trump and RFK are both anti-war. I think that is critical because Camilla is really just another Biden. She just will sign whatever it is that they put in front of her. And just look at what Republicans have endorsed Camilla. Dick Cheney, who's the father of the Iraq War, his own company, made all the billions from there. And when they were going to be investigated, what did they do? They resigned their American citizenship and moved to Dubai so they couldn't be subpoenaed. I mean, it's what I don't know. I know some of these people personally. I mean, Bill Kristol's father is the one that started the neocon movement. I know Bill. He's even spoken at our conferences back in the 90s. And he wrote the book to justify going into Iraq. I argued with him back then, that if we take out Saddam Hussein, Assad, and Gaddafi, remove these dictators, we'll bring peace to the Middle East. I said, you're out of your mind. You don't understand, culture. I mean, ethnic cultures are diametrically opposed. But he wrote the book, and you can still buy it on, I think, Amazon. But he was there with Dick Cheney, and that's what you get. And these people are pushing for war. They're trying to create war basically before even the election. NATO is trying to anticipate and protect continued warfare in case Trump is elected. It is raising $100 billion to continue to this fight against Russia. So that, like I say, I have spoken to RFK, and his position is the way to solve Ukraine war is cut off the funding. Look, Zelensky invaded Russia. Why? Militarily, a stupid move. All right. And Russia gained more, land out of the Donbass. I thought that's what you were defending, So the whole purpose of that was to try and force Putin to attack anything in NATO so they can call him the aggressor and justify World War III. That's what this is about. You can imagine if China invaded and was in 500 miles into California and started lobbying missiles at Washington, D.C., would we do nothing?
Mm-hmm. Right.
This is put the shoe on the other foot. He's been sending basically, drones and attacking even Moscow itself. And this is NATO wants to give him the long range missiles. What happened in the United States, I can tell you that the Department of Defense intervened and overruled Blinken and overruled Biden and said, no, we're not sending these long range missiles. You will start World War III. And can you really what they want the long range missiles to destroy as much of Russia as possible so NATO can invade. Like Lindsey Graham was on Face the Nation, and he actually told the truth for once. I don't think he realized what he was saying, but he said, look, there is $10 to $12 trillion of assets, natural resources under Crimea. And he said on Face the Nation, we cannot allow Russia and China to get that. I thought we were fighting for democracy.
Yep, gave it away.
It's a gas field underneath Crimea. It's huge. All right, and all this nonsense. I mean, look, Ukraine was never a country. They were kind of like the Kurds in Iraq. All right, they joined who promised to give them a country, and that's why they call them the. And take the Donbass. I mean, Khrushchev, that's where he grew up at. All right. His successor, Brezhnev, was born there. This is where Russians have been for hundreds of years. All right. It'd be kind of like, Mexico trying to take back Texas and say, well, you have to give up your religion and your language. I mean, I don't think that. I think if Canada tried to outlaw French, I think you're going to have a civil war there. Or if the United States suddenly stood up and said, "Oh, that's it. You can't speak Spanish anymore." And what if our government president becomes Islam? Oh, you have to give up Christianity. I mean, you can't do this kind of stuff to people. This doesn't promote peace. It promotes conflict and war. That's all it does. Even the Pope came out against Zelensky. I mean, he said you can no longer, follow the Orthodox Christian religion from Moscow. Says Christmas will now be December 25th, not in January. Even the Pope came out against Zelensky. He says you can't do this to people. It's absurd. You had the great schism in Christianity back in, I think it was 1054. You had then the Greek Orthodox, and then you had the Roman Catholic side.
Yeah, you can't call yourself a liberal society if you're stopping people from freedom of expression, freedom of religion.
Yeah, I mean, look, the reason Rome lasted, and they call it the Pax Romana, lasted 1,000 years. Why? Because Rome, a lot of the Christians I would say, engaged in misinformation, to put it in modern terms. Rome, yeah, there are hundreds of pagan gods. Okay. Rome didn't worship hundreds of gods. It's just that they had a freedom of religion. So that they conquered France, whatever, and Germany, they kept whatever religion they had. They didn't say you have to now adopt ours. All right. uh, the Goths from Germanic tribes actually invaded Rome, ended up, getting permission to come in as like migrants because Attila the Hun was moving from Asia to Europe. So they, and the Roman Emperor Valens allowed them in. And then he thought he would train them in the army to build up his forces against Attila the Hun, who would be coming. And once they taught all the Goths Roman tactics, they said, "Oh, thank you very much." And what did they do? They staged a battle and killed the emperor on the battlefield. Our word for God actually comes from the Goths, not Roman. Roman, the word for God was divine, divus. So we actually, the migrant invasion of Rome has been very profound, right down to our language. But so, I mean, you don't get peace by conquering and demanding you do this. Rome was smart enough and said, okay, fine, look, and that's why they didn't revolt against it, because it was free trade. You could, manufacture vases in France and sell them to somebody in Syria. It was okay.
Collaborative.
Yeah, that is how the world economy was before this stuff. As long as you create free trade between Russia and China, then its population is going to say, hey, what do you want? War? Then I can't sell anything over there. The more people are integrated economically, you create world peace. That's the answer. And McDonald's were all over China, Russia. Pizza Hut. I've been to Pizza Hut in Beijing. I mean, it's sometimes you're traveling internationally, you see a McDonald's, you get on your hands and knees and say, "Thank God, it's at least something I know." And I don't eat at McDonald's at home, but
It's
at
usually
least you
better
know what
over
it
there
is.
too. It's usually better compared to the McDonald's here in America.
Yeah. In Japan they have fish burgers. It's but I was in Berlin and I thought, gee, I just wanted to go get an egg McMuffin with some hash browns. I said, hash browns. They go, what's that? I said, well, we give you some French fries. Not quite the same. I mean, this is that's the world. I mean, it's not all the same everywhere.
Yeah, so it does appear that Trump is more dovish when it comes to the Ukraine-Russia conflict. But back to the digital currency, back to the market front, back to the price control stuff. Would he stand in the way of all of these, or is it simply pretty much baked into the cake of how the system's going to move forward?
They're trying to start war before the election. Worst case scenario, before January if he wins. Look, I just know these people. Like I said, I've sat down, had dinner, I've looked in their eyes. You don't see a warm light, trust me. And I've said in other interviews before, I separate my opinion from what the computer says. My job is to say what the computer is forecasting. The computer forecasts that Trump should win.
Okay.
And I've said on blogs, I said, look, I just know these people. And I said, I think they're going to try and assassinate him. And people, oh, come on. I said, no, you don't know these people. I do. There's too much. They worked their whole life to get to this point. I just don't see them suddenly saying, oh, okay, you win, and I'll go back to the farm. It's just not going to happen.
There's trillions of dollars at stake, like you alluded to there, with the 10 trillion underneath Russia, for example.
Well, it's even more than that. They know we have a debt crisis. I've been screaming at them for decades. And the way a default comes is the actual level of debt that we have is irrelevant. It could be 50 trillion. All right. The key is, as long as somebody is still in line to buy it, the default comes when you can't sell the new debt to pay off the old. That's how the city of Maine collapsed in the 14th century, etc. This has happened many, many times.
Your debt to GDP ratio can be 1,000% insofar as there's someone to buy the debt. Essentially.
Exactly. That's a Ponzi scheme. So what we're coming into now is the end of this debt cycle. Because these neocons do not know what they're doing. All they see is their own myopic vision. All right. So you have Blinken threatening China over Taiwan. Well, China holds 10% of the U.S. national debt. China has been selling. Why? Because they know they're pushing for war. If you're pushing for war, guess what? U.S. is going to default on whatever, China holds. You're not going to pay it. So they've been selling off debt. They started with 53 billion they dumped in the first quarter. And so if they're selling, all right, the line to buy is diminishing. And that's what I mean. These neocons only look at what they want to accomplish and do not understand how everything functions. So you stop China, you stop Russia from buying U.S. debt. Guess what? You need more people to buy it. If you can't, you're not going to sell it. If you can't sell it, that's the default. All right. So this is part of the problem. These governments are beginning to realize there is an end game here. And I've even seen charts, I can't say sources, but I've seen charts of them actually, who would get what, dividing up Russia. Russia is the wealthiest country in the world from a natural resource perspective. They've got, gold, diamonds, platinum, oil, gas reserves. This is why they took out Nord Stream. This is why Obama was trying to get us to go into Syria, because there was a pipeline from Qatar going through Syria, which they were trying to get gas to Europe to cut off Russia. They think if they stop Russia from selling energy, they would bankrupt it. Even the climate change, people don't realize. I mean, that's all a joke. Google it. You'll find out who was the first person to present climate change in Congress. It was John McCain. And what was it? Oh, we should be going to nuclear power in Europe to cut off the energy sales of Russia. They could care less about the climate. This was all economic. Take a look at the deal they cut with Nigeria. All right. They blew up Nord Stream. They promised Nigeria, and they were the test case for this digital currency. All right. U.S. taxpayers were to pay for a pipeline from Nigeria all the way up to Europe, since the U.S. blew up Nord Stream. They told Germany, look, keep quiet. We're going to do this. Then there was a coup in Niger. Google that one up. Who hopped on the plane to run over for that coup? Because they stopped the pipeline. Victoria Nuland.
I remember that actually. Yeah,
Connected
that was a couple years ago, wasn't it?
Yes, connected dots. This is all about. It's got nothing to do with climate. It's been economic to squeeze Russia. They just want to conquer Russia. I mean, Hitler tried, Napoleon tried. It's the third shot. But they know that the debt crisis is it. That's it. It's a Ponzi scheme. And as I said, if you can't sell the new debt, that's when it all comes crashing down. And unfortunately, as our computer has projected, this is the fall of Republican forms of government. By 2032, we'll hopefully come out with, I would like to see a direct democracy where we actually vote. Shall we go to war with Russia? Yes or no? We don't live in a democracy. We have no right to vote on anything. It's a republic, representatives, and like Vietnam. All right. You were 18, old enough to go die for your country. You weren't old enough to have a drink, and you weren't old enough to vote. But that's a democracy. It sounds like dictatorship to me. But this is what you have to look at. I mean, I also know, Klaus Schwab, his great reset is basically following what our computer has been projecting, that where this is, a major change is coming by 2032. So what he's doing is trying to push it in his direction of totalitarianism. All right. I'm saying, look, I'm hoping more for a direct democracy closer to what Switzerland has. But, I mean, this form of government is the most corrupt historically. You cannot bribe a monarch and you cannot bribe a dictator. But a republic, they're all up for sale. That's the problem. That's why if you do also a little bit of research, you'll see when Caesar crossed the Rubicon, it was a major debt crisis. Everybody thought he was just going to wipe out all the debt for everybody. Mark Antony even went and bought Pompey's estate on credit because he thought Caesar would just wipe out all the debts. And the lenders were basically the senators. Cicero was the great fake news of the day. What did they ended up doing to him? They cut off his hands, beheaded him, and Mark Antony's wife hated him so much she took her hairpin and was sticking it through his tongue. I mean, these are, if you really look at it, I mean, Cicero was one of the oligarchs, and he presented, Caesar as this dictator, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, he was also a dictator. It was a position in the system for a year. But when Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he did not have to fight to get to Rome. All the cities opened up their gates and they cheered him. He was a hero. All right. It was the Senate that fled to Asia. So they didn't have the support of the people. Just as today, I mean, how many people would really support everybody in Congress?
Yeah.
Hey guys, quick pause. If you're enjoying this content and this channel as a whole, but want to take the experience up a notch, then consider joining Capital Cosm Club here on Substack. You get access to exclusive portions of my interviews that you won't find on YouTube. You'll have the opportunity to ask my upcoming guests a question. You'll also get the chance to recommend me guests. You'll get a chance to DM me. My DMs are open on Substack for paying members only. talk about whatever you want to talk about. And we also do market write-ups. And with that said, I'll let you get back to the video. Thanks, guys.
Same thing.
Do you think that a direct democracy would work in today's setting, though? I mean, it may have been able to work in past times, but in our open society today, you have like all of these bot farms on Twitter and on social media trying to sway people's opinions. You have the major propaganda outlets propagandizing the masses. I mean, there's never been a time where discernment was more key, and when the public may be more unaware or misled as easily as they are, given all of the mechanisms to push influence and policy to the public. Do you think that direct democracy could still work in that kind of setting?
Well, it's probably better than what we have, because right now they just lobby and pay off the people in Congress. I mean, I think that we have a right to vote on major issues, such as, going to war or things of that nature. Shall we raise taxes? Shall we do this? Our problem is that, the Democratic Party is collapsing, much like the Federalists did back in the early 1800s. Why? Because both of them were pushing for this centralized power, one size fits all. Okay, like the abortion issue. It offends the religion of the people in the Bible Belt. So you're back to this Ukrainian idea. Centralized control has never, ever worked.
Mm-hmm.
If we just look at Rome, as I said, they allowed everybody to keep their own cultures, their own gods, or whatever. It worked. All right. You want an abortion? Go to California. But you can't say, no, you're wrong, and you have to change your religious beliefs because this is what we want. It's just, it's unworkable. And that's why the Federalists collapsed, because they wanted a strong, centralized government dictates to everybody. And that's what the Democratic Party has been doing. And the problem with that is when you merge it then with Marxism, I don't think they know how to run for office anymore. It's like, vote for me and I'll give you this. It's always bribing the people. It's nobody's saying, well, vote for me and I'll run the economy better than this guy. Just look at the Democratic convention. I think they used, threw Trump's name out, I think it was like more than 250 times. It was more of a hate fest. And this is part of a psychological warfare tactic. You demonize your opponent. They've done that to Putin. They did it to Saddam Hussein. It gets people to the point that you then think all Russians are bad. This is how it works. You demonize the leader, and then everybody that follows him is associated. Jamie Dimon at his speech at Davos, he understands this. He said, "You're demonizing this hatred of the other half of the country." So that's what polarizes things, and that's why the United States is not going to survive as a unity. The whole idea of 50 states was more or less like Rome. So everybody, states' rights, etc. And that's why the Federalists failed. They were trying to put one size fits all.
So do you see the United States? So you see the United States breaking apart?
Yes, there's no question about that.
What would be the lines that are drawn on the new map, in your opinion?
Probably you're looking at New England going off one way, the West Coast another way. and either the Bible Belt joins with the South, or then there will be 4 parts. But I mean, Europe is the same thing. Like I said, I've been in Athens when they were protesting against the Germans. They were marching down the streets all dressed up in uniforms. The ethnic diversity there, the language, and throughout Europe prevents unity, really. As I've said before, when they were forming the euro, they came to me, and I told them this is not going to work unless you consolidate the debts. But Chancellor Kohl said he couldn't do that, and he didn't allow the German people to vote because he knew he would have lost. So he admitted that he took Germany into the euro to create it as a dictator. But to do that, he said you can't consolidate the debts. So the volatility that was once there in the currency between countries only moved to the bond markets. So now you short Italy and you buy the bonds. I mean, that's what professional traders have been doing. So I told them, I said, you don't understand what made America, work. I said it was discrimination. They said, oh my God, how can you say that? I said, because it was fair. Right? Who didn't matter where they came from. Whoever was the last on the boat was discriminated against until they spoke English. They got a job. And then the second generation, all intermarried. So you see, ask an American, what are you? And they go, oh, I'm half German, half Irish, or whatever. You don't see that in Europe so much. Mainly because it's the language that keeps them separated. Simple as that. I mean, I had to speak at a central bank meeting in Paris, and it was. So I was one of the keynote speakers there. So I had to sit at the table with all the heads of the central banks, and the French guy was quite upset because the table started speaking English, because that was the only language everybody knew. And he was like, oh, this is Paris. I said, sorry. But I mean, the French, are sensitive about the language. I think they think that if Napoleon had won, the world would be speaking French. I even had a friend whose daughter was from Quebec. She was going to go over to Europe to see France, and I said, "Well, they're not going to speak French to her. I'm telling you." Oh, she speaks French. It's not according to them. She got there. She got back. She called me and says, "You're right. They would only speak English to me." I said, "You speak French, Canadian French. To them that's like I don't know, like Pig Latin or something." It's just the way things are. Europe is still very much divided culturally. I mean, it's a great place to visit. You get different food everywhere you go. You enjoy the difference in culture. I love Europe, but at the same time, that doesn't make it a unified country.
Especially in times of hardship. Things may have been swell when everyone was making money, prosperous, but now as we enter this new age where shit's essentially hitting the fan, that's when the differences start to unravel themselves.
Yeah, I mean, look, Ukraine is just been deliberately created by the neocons to poke the bear. When Yugoslavia broke up, it broke up along ethnic lines. Okay, so you have Montenegro, I mean, you have Slovakia. They all speak different languages and have different cultures. Okay, what was, there was the Minsk agreement that the Donbass was supposed to be allowed to vote on their separation, ignored. Angela Merkel, you can Google that up. And she even said publicly, I was really shocked by it. She said, well, we signed that agreement, but we never intended to fulfill it. we're only buying time for Ukraine to build an army. Why would you negotiate with anybody from the West for peace if you sign an agreement and it's just to buy time?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the West is no longer trustworthy. What can I say? I mean, it's, from an unbiased perspective, if you don't honor a peace treaty and you only were buying time, why should anybody ever negotiate with you again?
Yeah. Well, speaking of unbiased perspectives, I want to go back to your model, your computer model. You did mention that it's predicting a Trump win, but I want to get what I want to see what it's predicting in terms of the House and the Senate. Does it have any predictions on those two fronts? How they shape up?
I haven't run that one yet. We're going to in the next couple of weeks. I haven't really looked at the at those two, but what we look at from a combined perspective, where we take all the seats of the House and all the seats of the Senate and allocate them according to the party. The Democrats have been in a bear market really since the Great Depression. It makes lower highs and deeper lows. So it's not that they have been, and what you just look at the chart and take off the label and you go, oh, that's a bear market, and that's what it basically looks like. You have to understand on these elections, generally, it's maybe 10 to 15% of the people that really decide. I mean, look at, Obama won, I think it was 51.5%. Most of these things are 52, 53%. It's not, there's only 3 presidents ever to get 60% or more. It was FDR the first time. Johnson, after Kennedy was assassinated, probably a sympathy vote. And Richard Nixon, when he said he was going to take us out of Vietnam. All the others are basically under 55%. So it's not like anybody's ever gotten 70%. Wow, we don't have such landslides in the United States historically at all.
I see. And then what about any other key predictions that it's making that you think it's worth mentioning?
Unfortunately, it looks like war in 2025.
Okay.
And probably going into a peak sometime around 27. I don't think the EU is going to survive. It's falling apart right now, anyhow.
Do we know war with who?
It looks, I mean, this is crazy. I mean, and strategically, these neocons are out of their mind. You're threatening Russia on one side, Iran down on the other, North Korea, and China. All 4 are getting together. Can't you see what's happening? I mean, it's, in all honesty, if 4 wars, we cannot possibly have enough troops to deal with that. It's, I just see them as desperate. That, I mean, back in the 50s, we'd have these air drills, and we had to hide underneath our desks when we were in 4th grade. I think there's still some black and white pictures of that. Maybe the only thing I can say is that I think some of these people were psychologically damaged by that, because I do recall those days. I mean, you had McCarthy running around, indicting people for communism. I mean, it was the big Red Scare. I remember my father even saying, gee, I guess we're supposed to build an air raid shelter for nuclear war in our basement. I mean, this was the stuff that was going around back then. And so I think these neocons have been psychologically damaged, in all honesty. And from Russia's perspective, they look at us as imperialists. And I can't say that's wrong. I think when Khrushchev said, "We will bury you," they got their backs up and, well, we're going to spread democracy to the world. Well, communism failed. And I can tell you, I was invited by the Chinese government when the Asian currency crisis took place. So I went over, and I was actually probably the first American to be actually invited by the Central Bank of China. It was very interesting. They were much more proficient than, I went because I went to go see the Great Wall. I figured I'm just going to have to listen to some bureaucrats again, be kind of boring. I was absolutely surprised because everybody that was running the central bank had been sent out and worked on dealing desks in London, New York, and Tokyo, etc. So when I went there, they were all traders. Then I understood why they called me rather than somebody from Harvard or something, and I was then taken by the government to this secret facility that was surrounded by tanks and everything. Had 3 huge satellites on the roof, and I'm thinking, oh my God, where am I going? You would have thought I was like a head of state because I was like in a motorcade. With protection in front and back. And I was, where am I going here? And I went to this facility, and there were at least probably 300 people in there, all downloading everything from the internet. And then I was taken to a room, and they had downloaded everything I had ever written. And I was like shocked. I said, I don't even, know where some of this stuff is, but, they were monitoring absolutely everything, but they were not interfering like the Russians did. And there were like 249 varieties of tea that they were tracking. I had no idea that there were that many varieties of tea in China. So I guess there's a lot to say when all the tea in China maybe is a good, maxim or whatever. But I was helping them actually become capitalists. The questions I was asking, that they were asking was very interesting. They said, why is this tea selling for like $1 here and $5 over there? I said, well, where does it come from? Well, here. I said, well, first you have transportation costs. It's like, oh, okay. I said, then somebody's going to pay more for one tea versus another because they like this more. It was like I was teaching them humanity.
Right. Human nature, incentives.
And I could see there in the meeting why communism failed. Because that one tea that's $1 here has to be $1 over there, even if it costs you $10 to get it there. So you could see it was a very enlightening trip because I got to actually see why communism failed.
Yeah, it's a very aloof market model. It's aloof to human nature.
Yes, it dehumanizes. Communism dehumanizes everybody. That's really what it does. And that's what the left is kind of doing in the United States. I can tell you, because I also went behind the Berlin Wall before it fell to actually see what this was all about. And they were teaching children in the schools then that the state is really your parent.
Right.
And if your biological parents ever spoke against the state, you were to report them. And we see that like in California. That's why Elon Musk was moving out. If the child at 10 years old tells the parent that, or the teacher that maybe they want a sex change, they weren't supposed to tell the parent. The state is now the parent. I mean, this is exactly what was going on in Berlin, very, very strange to me. But, I mean, it's not even realistic.
Would you consider China still a communist country? And
No,
if are there any real communist countries still around, aside from maybe North Korea?
that's really about it. Communism is when the government owns everything.
Mm-hmm.
All right. China, that's not the case. But you have to understand Asian culture. They keep the name of the party the Communist Party. Why? Because they would have to take Mao's picture down and say he was wrong. All right. So they leave the name so they don't have to admit that he was wrong.
Right.
All right. But they're not communist. Authoritarian, okay. But not communist, because communism means that the government owns everything and there's no private ownership. That's what communism is, period. Now, you still have that in North Korea. Even Cuba failed on that issue. So it's, they unfortunately, because they kept that label, you hear the communist China. And, they're not really communists. They got more billionaires than I think than we do. But it's.
But do their billionaires run their political class in the same way ours do? Do they have as much influence as the ones that ours do? Ours pretty much control us.
I don't think as much, but certainly, yes. I mean, that's largely the way it goes. I mean, they have. It's really kind of a republic is there as well. So is Russia. We're we get a lot of propaganda here. Putin, his election, that was all written. No, it's not. I mean, they don't understand these areas that were communist. Once these people tasted freedom, there's no way they were going back.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason Putin had so much popularity was because their other choices was an oligarch, Boris Berezovsky, who I actually knew, and the other side was the old hardline communists. They still have a communist party there. And Putin was he was neither an oligarch nor was he a communist. And that's why the Russian people were so thrilled to have him, because they did not want to go back the other way. That became self-evident in the 1991 coup. The hardliner communists, they staged a coup against Gorbachev. They surrounded him when he was on vacation. And that's when Yeltsin had to stand on the tank. And all the tanks were there. And he said, do not fire on your own people. And they stood down. Because they stood down, the coup collapsed. But they were trying to take it back to the USSR. But that's what you get. I mean, in a revolution, it all turns on the military. Do they support the people there in power, or do they not? I mean, just look at Rome. I mean, even these theories of Klaus Schwab, etc., and one government ends war. It does not. I mean, just look at Rome. Find one government. How many civil wars did they have? Human nature does not change. That's why history repeats, because we will do the same thing pretty much all the time.
They want to replace humanity with AI and automation, like AI policing, AI ubiquitous within everyone's living. Isn't that what they're trying to do?
More on, like, for example, in the I would say in the political power books, there was a revolt in Byzantium against Emperor Justinian. and it's called the Nika Revolt, Nika. And there were some 40,000 people that were, against the emperor. They put up a puppet emperor in the big stadium, and the emperor was about ready to flee the city. His wife said, "Look, you have a legion outside that are not Greek. Bring them in; they will defend you." They did. They killed some 40,000 people in the hippodrome. That is a political lesson, all right, compared to what I just said about Moscow. Don't fire on your own people. They brought in a legion that were not Greek. They had no problem killing Greeks. This is why the EU wants a national military, so they can send Germans in against Greeks or Greeks against Germans. You don't use the same ethnic core because they won't shoot each other. This is a political thing. So to answer your AI question, if you create robots, which is what they want to do, it has no allegiance to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And if they say kill everybody that's in the hippodrome, they will just kill everybody in the hippodrome, period. It's not really AI. It's a very loose term. I mean, as you know, I've been a programmer, since the 60s. I do not believe it's possible to create actually a sentient being.
Yeah. In a sense, just refers to a self-learning program.
Even that, it's not. I mean, you can even put in GPT, ask it what's the difference between that and our computer system Socrates. That's a language-based system. Our system actually makes decisions. How? Because I had to train it. I had to do it. This AI nonsense that they think they create a neural net. They throw all this data in, and suddenly it will become alive and know how to do things. IBM spent a fortune on Watson, and they pitched it. Oh, it's going to solve, cancer. It failed. It does not have. You can't just create a neural net, throw everything in, and expect it to suddenly emerge with the knowledge of how to do things. It doesn't work that way. All right. There's just little nuances that, being an international hedge fund manager, you had to look at the whole world. Is this one moving to the left? That one, you had, that's what I had to teach the system. Yeah. All right. It's different.
It requires constant human supervision to make sure it doesn't go off in a haywire direction.
Yeah. And you certainly wouldn't want to create one of these neural nets and have it control all the missiles and stuff, because you don't know what's going to come out of it. Kind of like Terminator, but not that it's going to say, "Oh, you're a human and I don't like humans." I mean, it's not going to have that ability.
It's just a very complex mathematical model that adds more weight to whenever it gets a prediction accurately, and then subtracts weight when it gets it incorrectly. It's kind of like this. The way they taught it to us back when I was in undergrad is, think of a pigeon trying to identify a Picasso painting. You reward the pigeon anytime it gets it right, and you don't give it any food when it doesn't. And eventually, over time, it'll be able to spot Picasso's paintings.
Right. I mean, look, this is pretty much it. I mean, I don't see. You can't teach it nuances. There's something more to humanity than just that. I mean, I have two French bulldogs, and they have different personalities. What makes the personality different? It's the same thing you see. Consciousness in dogs are different and same species, they have a different personality than between two humans. There's something more to our brain than just a supercomputer.
Yeah.
That's what, neural nets was all this idea. Just throw it in, shake it up, and now comes, the Holy Grail or something. I mean, I've never believed in that, and I can mimic it, no problem. I can write a
It
program
simulate
and say,
intelligence, but that doesn't mean it's actually intelligence.
right, exactly. I mean, I can make it say, okay, fine, you can talk to it, and then you insult it, it will insult you back. All
Yeah.
right,
But it's not
but
going to
that
become
doesn't
sentient.
mean, yes, it's not actually getting an emotional response. I can just mimic it, but it doesn't. You can't create life like that.
Yeah. An if then statement is not sentient. I mean, that's really what it's a very complex web of if then statements.
Yes, exactly. And that's pretty much it. So with Socrates, I had to teach it what I would look at directly, not say dump all this in and tell me what to do. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, totally. Well, hey, Martin, I mean, I think we've covered a vast variety of topics. Anything else you want to talk about that we didn't get a chance to before we wrap up?
Now, I think that, just everybody should understand that, you know, there is a deep state, in the sense that the deep state are these people that are not elected, but they run pretty much everything that's there. Um, as I've said before, I can run for Congress. I can tell you whatever you want to hear to get elected. And you get down there, and what happens? They won. This is how you're going to vote. And just look at the votes. They're all down party line. Even the Supreme Court. And what's the first thing that the state, press says? Oh, it was the left versus the right. I mean, this is how they view the entire world. We're just going into this very polarized situation. The press is fueling it even more, and that's what breaks up the country. How can you possibly have one philosophy, and imposed upon everybody?
Yeah, and that's the thing with Trump again. I mean, he's very dovish on the Ukraine-Russia war, but I wonder, is he just saying some of this war hawk stuff in regards to Iran just to kind of get a certain faction of neocons off his back, just so he can get in? Because when he was president, he did push back against Bolton, because when they assassinated Soleimani in 2020, I believe Bolton wanted to push for a war with Iran, and he was able to kind of push him to the side and not go for that. Do you think Trump is kind of playing that game?
Not really, but there is a difference between Russia and Iran. Russia, you can at least negotiate with. All right. You're not dealing with a fundamental religious difference. Iran is Shiite. Okay. And that is basically means that they are, that's their core religion. Okay. That means the church runs the state. So there's no negotiation there. You can't say, okay, you got to stop this and do that. I mean, so it's a little different philosophy, motivation, whatever you want to call it. I think you can even negotiate with China and Russia more so than Iran.
Well, I think that's covers pretty much everything then. Martin, where can people find you?
ArmstrongEconomics.com. We don't sell advertising. We don't. It's meant to be a public service, and that's what we try to do. You don't have to put in your name and keep clicking off, and we don't send out tons of emails or anything like that trying to sell you swampland in Florida.
Which will be probably really cheap. Couple tomorrow.
Maybe we'll see.
Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on, Martin. If you guys enjoyed this, be sure to give us a like, subscribe to the channel if you're getting value out of these videos. Comment down below. Go, Martin, go. If you agreed with Martin's viewpoints, if you disagreed, let me know why. I'm really interested to get your take here. Also, check out our Substack. We get early access to all of these interviews for Substack members, along with a bunch of other perks. So be sure to check out the Substack. Link to that is down below in the description box. And with all that said, you guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye, y'all.